Welcome, fellow recovering traditionalists, to episode 207, The Math Foundations, what elementary students need before you ever have them operate with numbers. Over the next few episodes, I'm going to do a series on building math fluency in elementary students. I'm going to share what I wish I had known when I first started teaching, the foundational concepts that actually build students' mathematical understanding, not just their ability to follow procedures. We're diving into the foundations that come before operations in this episode. Before students can truly add, subtract, multiply, or divide with understanding, they need 8 critical concepts in place. And once you know those foundations, you can finally be able to get your students on track to developing true mathematical fluency. Now, if you're an upper grades teacher, this is still for you. The foundations aren't just set in pre-K to second grade. When you move to having students operate with fractions and decimals, you need to ensure your students have this foundation about the fractions and decimals first. Many students can do the math, but they don't understand it. And the problem isn't that they just need more practice with it. They are missing something much more foundational. They are missing a sense of what the numbers are all about. And here's what's happening. We're asking students to operate with numbers, to add, subtract, multiply, and divide before they truly understand what those numbers mean and how to represent them and what the quantities actually look like and relationships around them. It's like asking someone to write sentences before they know what words actually mean. Traditional math instruction jumps straight to teaching operations. We show students how to add, how to carry, how to borrow or regroup, what the steps are for multiplying and dividing. But we skip the foundational concepts that make operations make sense to students. Like I said, there are eight number sense concepts that make up this foundation for our students' math understandings. And in this episode, I'm going to share the 4 early numeracy concepts that every student needs, yes, from pre-K all the way through 5th grade, to truly understand numbers before they're asked to operate with them.
Welcome to Build Math Minds, the podcast, where fidelity to your students is greater than fidelity to your textbook. I'm your host, Christina Tonnevold, the recovering traditionalist and BuildMathMinds.com founder, where my mission is to change the way we teach elementary math to our kiddos. So, are you ready to start building math minds and not just creating calculators? Let's get started.
These 4 early numeracy concepts are from the research of Douglas Clements and Julie Sarama. They have different names for a few of these concepts, and I rephrase them to make them make more sense to me. They are subitizing, verbal counting, object counting, and cardinality. Now, you might be thinking that these sound like kindergarten concepts, but stay with me. Yep, even the upper grades need all these. So the first early numeracy foundation is subitizing. This is the ability to recognize how many items are in a group without counting. Think about when you see 5 show up on a die. You don't count them. You just know that it's 5. That's subitizing. But here's what most teachers don't really realize is that subitizing isn't just for little kids recognizing small quantities. It develops as they progress through numbers. In pre-K to kindergarten, students are learning to recognize 1, 2, 3 objects without counting. But subitizing evolves into seeing number relationships with larger quantities. So like when they see 8 dots, they might see 2 groups of 4, or they might see a 5 and a 3. And in upper elementary, fraction subitizing is still important. When students look at a fraction model, can they instantly see that it's 3/4 that's being shown? Without subitizing, kids get stuck in the count everything by ones mode, which bogs them down and doesn't allow space for them to see relationships between quantities. And that makes everything so much harder. Adding, subtracting, multiplying, working with fractions, all of it just takes longer, and it makes it so much harder if they can't see relationships. And subitizing is the place that we start with that. All right, early numeracy foundation number 2 is verbal counting. Again, you might be thinking, of course my kids can do that. But verbal counting is more than just the recitation of numbers. It's understanding the patterns and structure of our counting sequence. Does their counting at those decade numbers sound funny because they say things like 28, 29, 2010, right? Have you ever heard that? Can your students count by tens starting from any number, like 37, 47, 57, 67? Can they count by 2/3? Verbal counting shows that students understand the patterns in our number system. And when they understand these patterns verbally, it transfers to their ability to then compute. A student who struggles to count will struggle with adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing because counting is the foundation of all the operations. Now, early numeracy foundation number 3 is object counting. This is where students understand that saying a number name has an actual purpose. You count things. In early grades, we're making sure that students touch one object and say just one number, but this develops also. Can your students count objects that aren't in a nice, neat line? Can they keep track of what they've counted? Can they count fractional parts? Can they organize their counting strategies when problems start to get more complex? This is all part of object counting. Now, the 4th early numeracy foundation is cardinality. Cardinality is understanding that the last number you say when you're counting represents the total amount that you've counted. This sounds simple, but have you ever asked a kindergartner, how many are there? After they've just counted out 5 things. They've counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then instead of just saying 5, when you ask them how many are there, they just count again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Instead of saying 5. They're not seeing it as a set. Now, cardinality does evolve beyond just that early counting. It's about understanding that numbers represent quantities and sets, not just a position in the counting sequence. Students with strong cardinality understand that 47 doesn't just come after 46. It represents 47 actual items as a set. They understand that 3/4 doesn't just mean 3/4 or 3 out of 4. It represents a specific quantity and a specific place on a number line. When students lack cardinality, they treat numbers as meaningless symbols to just manipulate. They might get answers, but they have no sense of whether those answers actually make sense. So here's why I'm doing a podcast about what many may seem as trivial mathematical things. Traditional math often skips right over these foundations. It assumes that because students can recite numbers or follow procedures, they have these foundations, but they don't. The beautiful thing is, though, you can work on these foundations at any grade level. Whether you teach pre-K all the way up through 5th grade, you can incorporate activities that strengthen these concepts. And you will see the difference in how your students think about and work and operate with numbers. So here's what I want you to do. This week, pay attention to those 4 foundations with your students. When they're working on math, pay closer attention for those 4 early numeracy concepts. Are certain students counting by ones when they should be subitizing? Are they struggling with counting patterns? Do they treat numbers as symbols to just manipulate or as quantities that actually make sense? Just notice what your students are seeing and how they approach numbers, because awareness to these concepts is really the first step. Now, these 4 foundations are just the beginning. Remember, I said that there are 8 total. So there are actually 4 more concepts, and these are the 4 number relationships that build on these foundations that we start with and help students move beyond counting. Counting is foundational, but there comes a point we want them to move past that, right? So we're going to dig into those in the next episode. For this week, I'd like you to do some activities with your students that will help you see if they are subitizing. So you could do stuff that looks at all 4 of these, but I would really love for you to focus in on subitizing. And here's why. Those subitizable visuals will help your students progress into the 4 number relationships that we're going to talk about next week. Yes, they need the counting, so don't put that to the wayside if your students are working on that, but maybe just do a few little subitizing activities to see where they're at with this. And one of the easiest and fastest ways to do a subitizing activity is quick images. You basically just flash an image for a second or 2, depending upon how big of a quantity you have and the ability of your students at the time. And then you ask the students, how many did you see? And how did you know it was that many? To help you with that, if you don't have subitizing cards, I've got 2 sets for you for free. One is for pre-K to 2nd grade, and it focuses on subitizing the numbers 0 through 10. I call them savvy subitizing cards. And then the other set is for 3rd through 5th grade, and that focuses on subitizing with fractions. Once you get the download, just print them off on a heavy cardstock paper, and then use them as flashcards with your students. Now, here's one little suggestion. Even if you teach upper elementary, you may still want the savvy subitizing cards because they will help you see what foundations your students might be missing, right? If your students can't subitize 5, then they won't be able to subitize 3 groups of 5 when you are trying to help them understand multiplication. I'm going to link up the places to request both the Savvy Subitizing cards and the Fraction Subitizing cards in the show notes, which is buildmathminds.com/207. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, both of the links will be in the description of the video. So thanks for joining me for this episode. And remember, it's the first one in our series. In our next episode, we're going to dive into those 4 number relationships that I mentioned. And these are the relationships that help move your students from counters to mathematical thinkers. So until next week, my fellow recovering traditionalists, keep letting your students explore math, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep building math minds.